Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99, download the free Bonus Round app on iOS, Android, and Roku, and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. In a world where game show imperfections go unchecked, where judgment calls are questionable, and where clocks tick with unsynced inaccuracy, there is but one elite force to investigate it all. Armed with the latest in atomic electromagnetometer and gas chromatography mass spectrometry technology, Game Show Forensics is always on the case. Join Robert McKee and his elite squad of game show scientists as they dive headfirst into the most absurd depths possible at GameShowForensics.com. Adult discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury. Tell Us About Yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is produced in partnership with the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, one of the largest history museums in the United States, and one of the leading museums serving families with highly interactive exhibits and programs. Since 1968, the Strong Museum has been dedicated to exploring the ways in which play encourages learning, creativity, and discovery, and how it illuminates cultural history. And their National Archives of Game Show History. Founded by industry veterans Bob Bowden and Howard Blumenthal, the archive is home to thousands of artifacts representing over 80 years of broadcasting, including props, set designs, video interviews with game show professionals, and other iconic elements from the history of television at play. For more information about the National Archives of Game Show History or the Strong National Museum of Play, visit museumofplay.org or call area code 585-263-2700.
Blue 35.
Tell us about yourself, would you?
Tell us something about you.
For any new viewers, why don't you tell us again about yourself?
We've met before, but let's meet again. Tell us about
What
yourself.
else can you tell us about yourself?
Perhaps you'd fill us in again and tell us about yourself.
I am Pete Buchbauer. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I am a stand-up comedian. I was a 16-time champion on the first season of Person, Place, or Thing. Yeah, it was a hell of a run.
Wonderful. Pete, are you a native of Los Angeles?
I am not. I actually I grew up in a small town in Virginia called Winchester, Virginia. It's about an hour outside of Washington, D.C.
So you're one of the
And
people
so,
who packed up and followed the dream to Hollywood.
yeah, exactly. I was one of those who there's only so much you can do when the full population of your town's 40,000. You're pretty limited.
Oh yeah, you
And
gotta go. You gotta go where the action is. Sure.
for me, I love to entertain. I love to interact with people. And I actually think that's largely what made me drawn to game shows. I grew up in a small town. My mother was a teacher. My father was an attorney, and we spent a lot of time. We'd go on family vacations, and the rule was if we're gonna do something fun, we're gonna do something educational too. And so that just gave me so much random knowledge that made game shows the next logical step.
So did you grow up watching that kind of TV, or did the love of games in general kind of inform that passion as you got older?
Oh, so absolutely. We used to watch Jeopardy nightly. And I distinctly remember when there would be new game shows premiering or when they do, things like the Match Game came back and they were putting it on prime time. And because I grew up, I'm a child of the 80s, so I grew up kind of at the end of prime time game shows being a thing. And then they all kind of went to the daytime. And only recently it's been great seeing them making a resurgence again. Um, but growing up, I used to love, and of course on sick days, watching Family Feud, The Price is Right, Let's Make a Deal, and just seeing these people from all over the place, sometimes just get lucky, and then sometimes these people who knew things that there's absolutely no reason a person who's a grocery store clerk from the middle of the country, there's no reason that they should know these things, but they just do. And I always found that so interesting, and it really drew me to the fact that these are just people. This isn't a scripted anything. This is literally people getting by off just what they know. And I always thought that was cool.
It is interesting because I feel like knowledge is the kind of thing that it's sort of a concealed weapon, right? You can't tell what somebody's area of expertise is just by looking at them. Like I remember the I don't personally remember the kind of big money quizzes of the 50s, but I know enough about them to know that there were a lot of shows, the $64,000 question in particular, where they would cast a seemingly average everyday person with this massive, database of knowledge. So it would be like a cab driver who knew everything about Shakespeare, or it'd be, a butcher who knew everything about classical music. That's fascinating. The idea that everyone is an expert on something, whether you realize it or not. And game shows, I think, do a good job of turning that facet of humanity into entertainment, I think.
It absolutely does. I think about, you look at current games like The Floor, where people come in and they tell you this is my expertise. And on a game like The Floor, someone can come in and say, I know everything there is to know about the periodic table. And then the next person next to them says, oh, I know all about trees. And suddenly you realize the periodic table guy knows a whole lot about trees too.
Yeah, right. There are like this like cross contamination of knowledge bases.
Yeah. People, I know from my time on Person, Place, or Thing that even the crew, because when you're there for, a long run, you really get to know everybody. I got to be to the point that to this day, I like to call Melissa Peterman's a friend of mine now. She's the host of the show. And
Of
she was
Person,
just
Place, or Thing.
yes.
Right.
And she was just so welcoming and genuine that we became friends just, while the cameras aren't rolling and you're just making small talk. But it was one of those talking to them all the time when we get through, because with Person, Place, or Thing, your first two rounds are very much you get a person, you get your place, you get your thing, you have to guess them. And then in the third round, it's speed, everything's going quick. And the speed run tended to be where I would lock in. And so all the time I'd have the crew come be like, I don't know how you got that. And my answer 90% of the time is, yeah, neither do I. Like it's somewhere in the back of your head. You just know this information. And
Well,
it's
the
things that you
ability
think
to
you're never going to dig.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that ability to recall information quickly, I feel like is something that you have to have instilled in you from an early age. You have to grow up with this prioritization, I think, of hand-eye coordination, I think is important when it comes to a show like Jeopardy, when you're hitting the buzzer and trying to get in
The
first.
buzzer. Yeah.
And I mean, a kid of the 80s, I'm sure that was at least some part of your life, the idea of hand-eye coordination and video games and that kind of thing. I mean, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Was it? Yeah.
No, absolutely. I remember, because I also have 3 siblings. So there was always a competition amongst the 4 of us, whether it be sports, because we all played sports, or if it was, Nintendo, and whoever wins gets to stay on and pass the controller to the other one because there's only 2 players per game. That was very much, and I actually think that's a large part of even watching game shows back in my childhood is we'd be trying to beat each other. We would play Trivial Pursuit, and it used to drive my family crazy because I would actually be that kid who, when I was bored, I would just read the Trivial Pursuit cards. And then when we would be playing the game, all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, wait, I read that one. I know the answer to that.
Yep. When I was in 2nd grade, I used to keep Trivial Pursuit cards in my pocket just because I loved looking at them.
Oh, yeah. And I think, going back to being on Person Place, or being on any game show, as I'm sure anyone you've spoken to says the same thing, that, you get there the day of your first show and you're kind of held in a room with a bunch of other contestants. And they come through to go over the rules with you, all the legality of making sure no one's cheating and making sure it's an even playing field. But then they also do like, we're just going to real quick do a test game with you. Just raise your hand if you know the answer, just so you kind of get used to the way the game works. And I remember we were in our little test and the answer was Bedrock, because it was a place and they were going through the information and it was all Flintstones information. Asked me like, oh, that's Bedrock. And one of the people who was in the room with us after, all of the legal people leave, and we're all just sitting in there waiting to find out when we're going to go up to play. He goes, oh, you're going to be trouble. I don't know how you knew that. And to which I just said, well, I watched cartoons. Like, there's no secret to a game like that. It's just the ability to, like you said, pull that information from the back of your head that you haven't thought about in 20 years. And some word just triggers it and you know the answer.
Isn't there a sort of perverse excitement that you feel in moments like that where you answer a question and somebody goes, whoa, how did you know that? And to you, it's basic information. You knew it because you've seen it all your life. But doesn't that kind of give you a hint as to like how you might do? I would have been excited going into that game if that had happened to me beforehand.
Oh, absolutely. And then what was really fun for me was, I guess it's probably my 7th or 8th day game that I'm in. And one of the questions was about, it was an ancient Egyptian ruler. And so I got there and I said Ramses. They're like, how did you know that? And I was like, well, it's the only ancient Egyptian ruler that I'm ever going to think of off the top of my head. And it just happened to be the right one. And if I'd been wrong and they went on to the next round of questioning for me to try again, I don't know if I would have pulled another one. It just happened to be the one I needed that day.
They say the ability to write and perform comedy is a very intellectual pursuit, and that a lot of funny people are very smart, and a lot of smart people are very funny. There's a definite correlation there. I imagine that having not only the ability to kind of think on your feet as a comedian, but also the ability to perform in front of people helped you on a show like this.
Massively. I can tell you because there's a buzzer aspect for person, place, or thing also, especially in the speed round, you have to buzz in to get the answer. And I remember there is a thing because with person, place, or thing, there wasn't a studio audience. It was a very limited audience. It was basically crew that was watching. And for me, it was like, okay, this is nothing. But for somebody who doesn't perform, who's not used to being under the lights or being the, center of attention.
Which is most people. That is
Correct.
the vast
100%.
majority of people don't perform and aren't used to it. And it's, as somebody who has done it a few times, and you are like that in your own way. I, don't you kind of forget that sometimes? Don't you kind of forget that people baseline aren't like, they're not performers? You know what I mean? So sometimes, you'll be in a situation where you would have handled it differently, but then you have to realize that, well, they don't have the experience that you do. They don't have the whatever it is that you do that enables you to think that way.
That absolutely, and it only became more, I think, because of what I do and being a stand-up comedian, and I also think that's a large part of what helped me is because I spent several years just as a road comic, and when you're a road comic, you have these long, long drives, and I would listen to podcasts and would just get all this random knowledge while driving, where I had nothing else but to pay attention to the road and listen to the podcast. So I got that helped me a lot with just a lot of random knowledge stuff. But it's one of those where outside of person, place, or thing, I was also cast on Flip Side, and I didn't end up playing, so didn't make any episodes. But I went through the day of on set and talking with the other people who were potential players, and people being like, "Oh, well, I've never done anything like this. Have you?" And then being able to say like, "Well, yeah, I was on a show," and it's all sort of, you never want to tip your scales and let them know your experience too much, but to where it's a partner's game. And my partner for Flipside was a guy who I had actually beaten on person, place, or thing, and we've gotten to be friends. And he was like, "Oh yeah, this guy was a 16-time champion," and it's like, well, there goes the edge.
Are you timid about your game show experience being revealed as like a part of you? I kind of save mine as like I've done a few shows and I kind of save it as a fun fact. I tend to not lead with it these days, like when I'm meeting people or I'm in like a social situation.
It's been interesting because I've been doing stand-up comedy for 16 years. And I was at that point in my comedy where I had a decent following and I could perform kind of anywhere. But then suddenly this national spotlight that gets hit on you from game show fans are another breed. 100%.
That's one way of saying it.
Game show fans, they live and breathe game shows. They love them. They love watching them. They love being on them. They love every aspect of the game. And my following went from being I think I had maybe 6,000 or 7,000 followers prior to my streak on person, place, or thing. And then my following doubled on social media. And suddenly I got sent an invite to be on Cameo, to start doing cameos, which to me was so absurd. Like, because I still to this day, like, I know a lot of things, but it's just one of those things where it's also largely luck. Like, I'm just lucky that the questions they asked fall under the realm of things I knew. And it helps that I have a large breadth of knowledge, but it's not a given by any means.
Sure.
And I watched the show when I wasn't on it. After my run, I continued watching the show because I enjoy it anyway. But I'd look on and there were some games where it would drive me crazy because no one's getting an answer. And to me, it's like, oh, those are so easy. But then another game where all of a sudden, I don't know anything they're asking, but these guys on screen are making it look so easy. And people seem to forget that aspect of it. So like when I get invited to do something like Cameo, because I was a 16-time champion on a game show, I didn't know what to expect. And then I haven't gotten a lot of Cameo requests, but the ones I had one that was this dad who'd asked me to send a birthday message to his son who had, I believe, childhood leukemia, but they would watch the game show every day. And his son was legitimately sad when I lost. And he asked if I would send a birthday message to his son. And I was like, oh my God, you let me pay you for this. You don't have to pay me. Absolutely. Like, I'll do it. And it's one of those where you suddenly realize, like, to me, and my wife told me when we were going for the first day, my wife said, what do you expect? I was like, oh, maybe I can get one out of this. If nothing else, I'm not going to come out with anything less than I went in with. It'll be a cool experience. We're going to have some fun. And then after my winning streak, my wife was like, well, you're gonna get some fans off this. And I was like, oh, it's just a game show. And then I realized, like, oh my God, like when I say game show fans are another breed, it really is. And that's where I think about that little boy really struck a chord with me, for the fact that you think about what do they play in doctors' offices and waiting rooms, and in the chemo room, what's on the TV, and they're watching game shows because it doesn't cause you stress. It's something that's just fun to pass the time with, and you can be happy for the people you see winning. And it really had this occurrence to me that as much fun as it is to be on a game show, you're also, in a sense, bringing a little light to some people who are in a tough time.
Oh, for sure. Especially, and this type of TV in particular, I think lends itself well to that kind of connection, because it is a type of TV that people watch when they want to escape, when they want to not think about whatever's happening in the world or in their personal world. It's something that they can kind of tune out and watch and play and have fun and be successful. It's fun to answer a question before the contestant on TV does. It's fun
Absolutely.
to know it at the same time. It's fun to get your category, when you're watching a show. God, that's a really touching story. I've
It
talked.
really
It is.
it changed my perspective entirely.
Oh, I imagine it changed it a million percent. I've talked about it a few times on this show with other contestants, but the idea of becoming a contestant on a game show, especially nowadays with so many reruns and so many streaming platforms, it is sort of a lifetime investment. I mean, you're putting this image of yourself out there in this world where anything could be rerun. 16 episodes of Person, Place, or Thing. I mean, that show will come back at some point. It will pop up on one of these services, and you never know what effect you're having on the people that you're broadcasting that to.
So it was insane for me to think. So 16 wins on 17 episodes. And my run began airing on November 1st of 2023. And so when you include the holiday break where they're not going to show new episodes because of Thanksgiving, my first episode that I won was on November 1st, and the episode that my streak ended was on December 1st. And so for one full month, every weekday at 2 p.m., depending on where you're living or watching, I was on TV. And then halfway through, not even halfway, probably 8 days into my run, it was announced that Fox First Run, who produces Person, Place, or Thing, made a deal with Game Show Network, and Game Show Network was going to start airing reruns of the episodes already. And so by the time my streak ended, it had just started again on Game Show Network.
Oh, that's bizarre.
And then, because even at this point, they're in the midst of season 2 right now, but even at this point, Game Show Network doesn't have that many episodes to rerun, but are showing it daily. And so my wife's grandmother says all the time that she's woken up with me plenty of times, because she turns on the TV. She turns on Game Show Network in the morning and she's waking up and Person, Place, or Thing is on. And there's my son-in-law. It's so crazy to think that I've had a lot of friends who've done game shows at different times and with varying results. And a lot of them have been like, oh, I don't know, I can't do question games. I prefer the chance games and things like that. And I look at and I see the value in every one of them, every type of game.
Sure.
But there's just something to think, as you were saying, to get cast on these shows in general, you look at the pool of people who are submitting to be on game shows. And then that massive pool who've all sent in their application and, maybe a little video saying why they should be on the show. That pool, then casting takes that, massive net and just brings it down a little bit smaller. So the people who they're going to call, they're going to talk to over the phone or Zoom or kind of determine whether they think this is the right call. And then even that number gets whittled down even more to the people who actually compete that season. And then when you look at this group of people who are going to compete that season, and then you think about, well, every game can only have one winner. And if it's a game like Person, Place, or Thing or like Jeopardy, or where your winner will move on to the next episode, then the number of people who are going to win per season is even smaller. And so when you look at something like, for majority of season 1, because I believe my first episode was episode like 40 or 41. And then it wasn't until I think 100, episode 140, where someone beat my streak. And you look at the fact that like that streak held for so long. It really is incredible to think of how many other people were coming into that game show, because when I got there, they told us day one, oh, so far the longest streak we had was, 9 wins in 10 days. And good luck. And we were surprised he got there. And then towards the end of my run, because I would talk to the other contestants, and they'd all be like, yeah, they basically told us good luck. Like, they told us you were basically unbeatable. And I'm like, well, that's not the case at all. Like, no one's unbeatable. But let's have fun. Like, we're all here to have fun.
Yeah,
But you
sure.
start thinking about the fact that after my streak was over, every person that came in was being told, hey, right now the record's 16. See if you can beat it. And I've made so many friends from, and it's actually where I will say, I feel like Person, Place, or Thing are different from a lot of other game shows where there's almost like a familial element to it. It doesn't have the longevity of something like a Jeopardy or a Wheel of Fortune, where there've been just thousands upon thousands upon thousands of contestants. It's still small enough that when you find out somebody else was on Press Play, oh, me too. Oh, well, what episode? All of a sudden you're like, oh, we're alumni of the same class.
Right. Well, I had that experience with a show I did called Let's Ask America. It was on, this was over a decade ago, but all the contestants were on via Skype. And I was one of those people. And I remember running into like a pocket of friends that I had in middle school. And it was like 2 or 3 of them. It just happened to have also been on that show. I think it was a very wide net that they were using for casting, because it was all from home. So we were looking for people. Right. They were looking for, very diverse people. But yeah, that feeling is phenomenal. Also, the idea that there's no audience on Person, Place, or Thing. Out of all the shows I've done, I've never had an experience where I've been a contestant on a show that hasn't had a live audience. And I imagine
it's weird.
I bet it is. Well, I imagine that it also contributes to that sense of family that you have on a set like that, because it's just you guys there. You're not performing for 100 people in front of you. It's really just the crew in that studio. And I imagine, especially after so many days, you get to really be friends with these people that you didn't know at all, when you first walked in.
I remember walking up and, I knew the hair and makeup team all by name, to the point where the girl who did all the hair for Person, Place, or Thing, I reached out to her when my wife was looking for someone to do hair for our wedding. And she was like, oh, go to this person. It's a friend of mine. They're great. And it's like, awesome. Thank you. Like, and the wardrobe people, it's so great because I got to be, I had B, who was with me the first day. And then I had this guy Cleve, who was with me through majority of my run. And then on my last day, B was back. And she was like, I've never gone home for my, multi-day break and come back to the same campaign before. And I was like, hey, it's good to see you again. Welcome back.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
But it's also so interesting when I say the friendships and family aspect of it. The social media manager for Person Place With Things season 1 was this woman Manny, who become a good friend of mine, to where Manny, my friend Devlin, who I beat on Person Place With Things, who's been my partner on Flip Side. My wife, Manny's husband, we all went out to go watch a taking of Melissa's new show on NBC, Happy's Place. As like, oh, let's have the Person, Place, or Thing family kind of go on out to show support. And the guy who ended my run, Burke Floyd, is one of my dear. We got each other Christmas gifts this year. Like, we've gotten to be such good friends. And it's incredible because these are people who I find out later, like, our paths have intermingled many times without us ever meeting. And, people look at Los Angeles like, oh, it's this massive city, which it is. It's a huge, sprawling city. But when you think about the people who come here to do certain things, it's a pretty small town. And so eventually you are going to cross paths with the same people. And I remember, when you're on a run the way that I was, and you get to the point where my first goal when I got there day one was I want to win one. And then it was, okay, well, if I can get 5, that would be cool. Then after the 5th one, you're like, oh, let's see, maybe I can hit 10 and I can break the record. And you get 10, you're like, well, 15 would be cool. And you just start setting these new goals moving forward, but it's also exhausting. People don't really, I never did prior to doing it, never think about how exhausting a game show win streak really is. Because every episode, you're getting up there and you are, unlocking these parts of your mind that have been unlocked for years. You are in the lights, you're in the hair and makeup, you're in the wardrobe, you're getting mic'd up, for the audio guy. You're going through, sometimes, oh, we didn't get a good take on that. Let's just repeat it. And then we'll tell you if you got it right or not. We just want to get a more clear answer, the real basics. But just spending, 8 to 10 hours in studio, because you're doing multiple episodes a day, and it's exhausting. And you're getting up early, you're getting there early, you're leaving late. And I'll never forget my Person, Place, Thing. We film 6 episodes a day. And so in my first day, my first win was the last episode of the day. So I had spent the previous 5 episodes kind of in my head wondering, like, am I next? Am I next? What's going to happen? And trying to see during the other games, could I beat these people? And then it was a Friday, so I didn't get to go back until the next week. And I got there early, and I do my run, and I win all 6 that day. And that night, my wife had bought tickets, and she and I went to the Taylor Swift Eras tour here in LA. Right after I did the 6 straight games, I was still wearing the clothes that I competed on in the last episode.
Jesus, what a day.
And we went to the Eras concert. We watched 3.5 hours of Taylor Swift. And then as we were leaving, knowing that I had to be back on set at 7:30 the next morning, there was a tractor trailer accident outside SoFi Stadium where the concert was, which made everyone exiting the stadium have to exit through one lane.
Oh.
And so I got home at almost 3:30 in the morning, was back on set at 7 a.m., and then won 6 more.
That is a Herculean feat.
And by the time, on my last day, I won the first 3 episodes of the day, and then we break for lunch, which was the first time I got to meet the new contestant. because they all meet each other from the beginning, but my call time's a little bit later because I'm the returning champ, and they send me directly to hair and makeup and directly to wardrobe and all that. So I didn't get to meet everybody till lunch every day. And I remember going to lunch with all these other contestants, and they're all like, "Wow, like you're so great at this." And I was like, "It's luck." Like, and everyone asked me like, "What's the secret?" And I tell this to every person, every friend of mine who's been cast on a game show since, and I used to hear it to them before I'd even done a game show, was just enjoy it. Not everyone gets to do this. And at the end of the day, when you leave, if you win, you're going to leave with a little something extra in the pocket. And if you lose, you're leaving with these experiences that most people don't get.
Oh yeah, the experience is a prize. I say it to so many conversations on this show. Just the odds, and you mentioned it earlier, the odds that you have to beat over and over and over and over again to not only get to the point where you're invited to the studio, but to the point where you're a winner and you win again and again and again. I mean, that is, again, there's just so much victory baked into that interaction. It's you have to walk away from the experience knowing that you got to do more than so many other people got to do. And to a lot of people, me included, that's worth more than whatever you could win on a show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and like I said, the friendships that came, I remember people saying to me, probably after my 6th or 7th win, how would you feel if you lost? And I would just tell them, I'm going to lose eventually. That's from day one. My very first episode, I went in knowing at some point I'm going to lose. And, that's not going to be the end of the world. That's not going to change my life in the negative. I just hope that whoever I lose to has, really appreciates what they're coming into as well. And I actually, my wife and I went to dinner with Burke recently, and we were talking about that day that we met, that we competed against each other. And before, at lunch, talked very briefly with him at lunch because he knew he was going to be the first episode after. He was trying to get in the right mindset to play. And when I got to stage with him, and everyone's talking because the stage crew was, "Oh, what would you do with the money if you win? What do you do with the money?" And Burke said, "Oh, I'm not taking any money." He's like, "I'm donating any winnings that I get. I'm donating to the Children's Hospital of Orange County." And I was like, okay, this guy is an incredible person. To the point where I said when he beat me, I think, first of all, he didn't even realize he'd beaten me until they actually announced it. I immediately saw that he was beating me, and I just put my buzzer down because I was like, "No, I'll lose to this guy. I am fine losing to this guy." And he said to me when we had dinner recently, he's like, "Well, you shouldn't have done that." And I was like, "Well, no, I knew I couldn't catch you, and so I wanted to applaud you." Like, there are those people who go into these game shows, and when they lose, they're so angry. And they're so bitter that somebody else knew more useless knowledge than they knew. But I don't ever understand that aspect of it because, like what you just said, we've already won by being here. And these people, learning how many lives I touched was so rewarding. And then, a lot of the Fox First Run shows do this whole super fan thing where there's somebody at home who, if the person wins the grand prize that day, the person at home is going to win money too.
Right.
And I can tell you, and I said so many times, I loved it every time I knew I won this person $500. Loved it. The most devastating thing to me when I would not win the final round to get the big payday and I'd end up with, the consolation prize, wasn't the fact that, oh, I just got a consolation prize. I'm very happy with that. It's, oh man, I didn't get them their money.
Yeah, sure. You got someone else on your back, of course.
And I felt so bad to the point where a lot of them, during my run and whatnot, we all became friends on Instagram. And I would be like, "I'm so sorry I didn't win you money." And they were like, dude, you were awesome. Don't even, like, it's not even a big deal. But you would get a couple of like, yeah, I really could have used it. And I'm like, sorry. Like, okay,
Well,
my
you
bad.
did. You did your best.
Well, and it's so funny because the money that I was able to win came at honestly an ideal time for me. I was not originally cast to be on Person Place or Thing. I was originally cast to be on You Bet Your Life with Jay Leno. And then the writer's strike happened, and I get this call saying, hey, You Bet Your Life is going on an indefinite hiatus because Jay stands with the writers. But we got this brand new show. Would you be interested? We'll have to test you for it, but would you be interested? And I was like, I don't know. Can I get back to you? And it was my wife who said, just do it. Like, you're not going to, nothing's going to matter. Like, just do it. And I was like, it's a good point. So I called him back. Like, yeah, I'll do it. And 2 weeks before I went in to tape, I got hit and run. My car got totaled. I actually bruised a couple ribs, and I had no vehicle. And when I went to my insurance dropped me.
Oh my God.
I was in the midst of, I'm at that point, like every 6 months, I was like, oh, renew your insurance. And so I had it set to auto renew, but there's apparently, according to them, there was a 1 week gap where I was uncovered, and that's where my accident happened, which is complete
good
bull.
Lord.
And I know that it's complete bull, and it's just the insurance company doing what they do and taking advantage of people.
Sure.
But so I was like, all right, we'll send somebody out to assess and let you know if we can give you any money for the car. And they offered me like $200 for my car. And I was like, I can go to a scrapyard and make more than that. So no, thank you. But so I was without a car in Los Angeles, which is not the most public transportation friendly city. And then I went and did Person, Place, or Thing. And I was able to win enough money to put the down payment on a new car. And, I won vacations that my wife and I were able to use for our honeymoon. And so it was like, these were things that we didn't need, but if they were going to happen, that's when I needed them to happen.
Sure. Oh my God. Talk about the right place at the right time. That's a blessing.
And so, Aaron, I think the last time that I saw Melissa, I told her, like, it's crazy to me that I almost didn't do the show. That part of me, and this was my stand-up comedian in me, was like, the point of doing You Bet Your Life was you were doing a primetime show with Jay Leno. And then it's like, oh, well, you did the thing with Jay Leno, and that's something you could use for comedy clubs. And then it was, oh, well, if I had done You Bet Your Life, and even if I'd won You Bet Your Life, the prize pot on that was much lower than what I ended up making, because it wasn't a comeback the next episode. It was a one and done. And it's really interesting to see, because the guy who ended up beating my streak, Dimitri, he and I talk, and we were talking, when I went to go do Flipside, and he goes, is Flipside a one and done, or is it a continue on? It's like, oh, it's a one and done. He's like, yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I want my next thing to be, because is it going to be lucrative? And I hadn't even thought about that.
Sure.
And it's not a bad
this is not a terrible. It's not a terrible way to think about it. I mean,
no, not at all.
And especially in Los Angeles, I mean, there are so many shows and there are so many opportunities that you almost have to think about it that way. What's worth your time
is he's absolutely right. And when you look at something, it's unfortunate because it was just announced the Person, Place, or Thing will not be getting its third season. But it was one of those things where they had talked to me at some point about, oh, we'd love to do a Tournament of Champions and bring you guys back and see how you guys would do against each other. I was like, that'd be awesome. I'd love to do that. But, unfortunately it wasn't meant to be. But the thing is it was when Dimitri said that, I was like, I probably should give some thought into what is the payout for the show. Because I do, and I realized it when I went to Flipside, and when Devlin made the point of telling them, like, oh, he was a 16-time champion, is suddenly people are I don't, maybe part of it is there's an intimidation to it, but then there's also this attitude of, well, why are you here then? Like, if
Right.
you've already
Right.
done
Do
one of
you
these and
really
you've already
need it?
won.
Right.
Yeah. You've already done this. You already won. Like, why do you don't need this. I need this, not you. Which is not, let's face it. Unless you're going in and you're winning multi-million dollars in today's economy, everybody needs the next win.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you are a millionaire, things are rough right now. But at the same time, I will gladly take a game show with a lower payout if I think it'll be a fun experience. Because the word game is in there for a reason. Like, it is fun. It is meant to be fun. And, when you win, that's amazing. When you lose, you still had fun. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of the people who I went up against throughout my run had a similar mindset on it. You would occasionally get some people who would get really angry. There was a woman who almost ended my run, but she had the wrong answer in the speed round, and ended up not being able to surpass my lead. And then when I went into wardrobe, my returning champion wardrobe room was right next to the contestant room. And so I'm in there and they're getting me changed into new clothes. And I'm just hearing this lady talking about, cussing about how much of an asshole I am. And, he doesn't deserve this. And it's like, hey, I can hear you.
You just knock on the wall.
Not even. There's a curtain between us. But that's the thing is, I don't know her situation. I don't know where her life is or was at the time and what needs she had that she wasn't able to meet because of not winning. Like, I don't know her situation. So I have no ill will towards that lady, but I know for a fact, she probably to this day really doesn't like me.
Well, she should have had the right answer.
Well, and
Quick
and
solution.
That's the thing is she got mad because during one of the rounds, the question was, this pop star started in a famous girl group in the late 90s. And the answer was Beyonce.
Yeah.
But she buzzed in before I did. And she said Destiny's Child.
Ooh.
And they said, no, that is not correct. And then it comes back to me to ask a question or else guess. And I was like, well, I'd like to make a guess. Is it Beyonce? It is Beyonce. And this lady was packing up her stuff in the dressing room being like, I gave him that answer. Otherwise, I would have beaten him. And it's like, first of all, I knew the answer. But you need to pay attention to the question. You didn't give me an answer. You beat yourself.
Yeah, right. She didn't give it to you out of charity. She said the wrong thing and it tipped you off.
And what's funny about that is on a different game, on a different day, we had a question and it was about a Canadian actor. And in the first round, someone had guessed Ryan Reynolds. It was wrong. But they put the guesses up on the screen so we can still see the guesses so we don't guess something a second time. And then the clue for the second round was, this actor had a very famous "Hey Girl" meme. And I immediately was like, oh, it's Ryan Gosling. And I buzz in. Oh, and I am looking at the board and I said Ryan Reynolds. And they went, I mean Gosling. And they were like, sorry, we need to go with your first answer. And the guy who went to it right after was like, is it Ryan Gosling? And the guy's like, I didn't know that, but luckily Pete screwed up.
Yeah, sure.
And I wasn't mad about that. I'm like, I did screw up. And I gave him the answer. And if he beats me, I did that to myself.
That's an aspect of the contestant experience that I don't talk about very often because it's never thankfully applied to me. But I would very strongly recommend against going on a show and hanging all of your financial hopes on whether you do well on that show.
Because I think, number one, you're not going to make it through the audition process. The people who are in charge of casting are going to pick up on that. They're going to pick up on the desperation. They're going to pick up on that slight anger, and you're not going to make it through. And even if you do happen to make it all the way through, you are going to have, at that point, you will have put so much pressure on yourself to perform and win and get yourself out of whatever hole you're in, that it's just Absolutely. It's not going to go well. You have to be in a certain frame of mind in order to do well on a game show. And you could be in need and go on a game show. I think that's why a lot of people do it, and a lot of people are successful with that. But to count your chickens before they hatch, I think, is a recipe for failure.
Well, and that's, I have a good friend of mine through stand-up comedy, Isaac Hirsch, who was just on the Jeopardy Training Champions, who had a very good run last summer on Jeopardy. And had previously, it's probably almost 10 years ago, he did Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And Isaac's one of those too, where he every game he's like, maybe I can pull it out. And that's the attitude I feel like people should always go into. When I watch games, and just to go back, I've been watching it, the new season just started, but watching the floor, is when you get some people who go up so cocky because, oh, well, this is my category. And it's like, yeah, but you don't know their lives.
Yeah.
And it's the same aspect I look at where something like Person, Place, or Thing was so great for me, was I've had a lot of experiences in my life. I have, from having a mother who was a history teacher, to being a multi-sport athlete throughout high school and watching all the sports growing up. I've done theater. I've loved watching movies and comedy my entire life. So I have such a wide berth of things that I really enjoy, which make a game like Person, Place, or Thing really beneficial for me, because while it doesn't, advertise itself as being pop culture, a lot of it is. If you're trying to name a famous person, there's only so many ways that person can be famous. And it's going to be from music, from acting, from politics. Like, you're very limited on what that person will be famous for. But if at least 2/3 of the possibilities are things that I'm into, my odds are pretty good. And I think that's what people often go into game shows thinking, I know how to win. And that's a mistake.
Yeah, for sure.
It's counting your chickens before they hatch is, I think, the biggest detriment to anyone going into, even, you can go into a lot of game shows and have a lead going into your final round and lose. But you have that lead and you get cocky and you think you're unbeatable. And it is that, that reminder that, hey, it's an even playing field whether you think it is or not. And the FCC makes sure of it too.
Oh yeah, there's so much stuff in place that it is you are getting a fair shake no matter what. And I think that if you don't do well in a game show, it's really no fault but your own.
I think of, the bonus round on Person, Place, or Thing, which is when you can win the big prize. It's timed. It's 60 seconds. And when you're pushing it close and you blurt out the answer right at the end, and then they wait because the FCC compliance person needs to see, did the clock run out before you said it or not? And you're sitting there on pins and needles, just like, did I get it in time? To then find out you didn't. And you're like, all right, I'll try again next time. But then when you find out you did, oh, that celebration that's legitimate. Oh, I think that was a question I got a lot when I heard people saying, like, were your reactions, like, were you coached in how to react? It's like, no, like they tell you, like, be, be a person, if you feel something, show it. But that's all the coaching they give you. It's the fact that you realize, like, oh crap, I just added $5,000 to my bank account that I didn't have when I got here. That's what elicit a legitimate reaction from anyone. And I think those are things that people don't always think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot to that experience that you have to be in it in order to realize that they're in play. And just watching game shows from home, it just doesn't do it. I have a fascination with people who move to California to pursue the dream,
Yes.
the dream, whatever it is, whether it's performing, it's hosting, it's acting, it's singing, it's dancing. In that transition period, and even in the first, I don't know how long you've been in California, but even in the first, few months as you're getting adjusted to it and you're kind of finding your feet, were there any moments, or is there one moment in particular of fear or self-doubt, and how did you get out of it?
So that is, the fear is always real. So when I came out here, I had made the determination that I couldn't grow my comedy career anymore in the Washington, D.C. area. I was going to need to be where industry was much more prevalent. And so the decision was, do I go to New York or do I go to LA? And because of stand-up comedy, but also I write and I do a little acting, and I was like, I'm going to go to LA. And when I first moved out here, I moved out with another friend of mine, and we had my former agent had lined up an apartment for us. And then literally 2 days before we got to Los Angeles, my former agent, part of why they're not my former agent, called and said, "Oh, I never finalized the deal on that. That apartment's not available anymore." And we said, "What? We're almost to LA. We don't have a place to live." And the exact response from my agent was, "Well, didn't you say you got a brother out there?" Because my brother, who still is out here, but my brother, and I was like, "Yeah, he's in a tiny apartment with his whole family." But I made the call, and my brother said, "Come ahead, come and sleep on the couch for a bit." And so first getting here and not having a place to live and literally going, okay, well, I need to start from scratch. Because I think that's something people don't always think about either, is when you move from, you'll see a lot of times in Los Angeles in the comedy scene, the guy who used to be the funniest guy in Wichita, Kansas. But Wichita, Kansas is not Los Angeles.
Right.
And being the funniest guy in a scene of 150 comedians, well, then you come over to a scene of 10,000 and it's like, oh, I'm nobody again.
Yeah, you kind of
And
struggle under the current.
and that thing is people who come follow that dream with an ego are not going to survive. You need to come in, you need to know that I'm gonna take my knocks. I'm gonna be Rocky Balboa. I just need to make it through that last round. And I may not win, but I'm gonna make it to the end. And I think I was very fortunate when I first got here, and I got a couple of voiceover jobs that really helped pay bills. But there's this, and the self-doubt, I constantly, it really wasn't until I met my wife, who is Los Angeles born and raised, that I was like, okay, I'm not leaving. Because I think for the first couple of years I was here every other week, I was like, I might need to go. But when you follow, I think that's the biggest thing people need to remember when they're following their dreams, is that unlike when it's a dream, reality takes more time. There are those rare occasions when there's an overnight success, but they are incredibly rare and becoming more rare by the minute. And so when you start meeting people who, been working in Los Angeles for 25, 30 years, and you don't know their name, that doesn't mean they're not working. And that's, I think, what a lot of people forget is everybody wants to become the next Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Angelina Jolie. Everybody wants to be the big name with Kevin Hart's. But you got all the people below them who are actually working more. They might not be getting as big a paycheck, but they're getting a lot more experience and they're doing a lot more. People don't think about the fact that the entertainment industry is still a job. I have a lot of friends who have been relatively successful regionally as stand-up comedians, but can never jump out of that regional area because they don't understand that you may not have a 9 to 5, but you got to wake up and you got to write. You got to get up and grind. You got to go do the open mic at the bar with 6 drunks watching to see if this material works. There is no fast track to anything. And people seem to forget that. And you see it, especially recently, we had the devastating fires. And I would see so many people I knew from different areas. When I used to live outside of DC, I spent a little over a year working for a FEMA contractor doing disaster housing inspections. And that job was literally going out and assessing damages. And, you'd get people who try to defraud FEMA by saying, oh, well, look at all this water damage. And it turns out, well, they just didn't have a roof at the time, but they were building the house. It had nothing to do with the disaster. But you see these people who have lost everything. And then it hit so close to home recently with the fires. But then you see people online saying, oh, well, it was the Palisades. Those are millionaire, actors. Those are rich musicians. Those are millionaires. They're fine. But you also forget that they weren't always millionaires. And those people did a lot of work to get that house. And for some of them, that was a house they bought when they hit it big. And now they kind of retired. And their name because they did a lot of stuff in the 90s or the early 2000s. But you notice they're not really working much anymore. And now they just lost their home. And people don't think about the fact that these are, even the people you see, I had times when, I was waiting tables and recently, and people have been like, oh, haven't I seen you on TV? And it's like, yeah. And now I'm here. What can I get for you?
It's a job. It's a job, like you said. Yeah, for sure.
And like any job, it ebbs and flows. And so it's feast or famine, but it's still a job. And so it's that determination, I think, is the most important thing for anyone who decides they're going to be that dream follower is, don't give up when they say no. In my opinion, there's no such thing as a flat out no, there's a not right now. And I think that's the bigger way I like to look at it.
Tell Us About Yourself, Conversations with Game Show Contestants, is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Cory Anotado. Researcher Chuck Donegan. This has been a production of BuzzerBlog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99, download the free Bonus Round app on iOS, Android, and Roku, and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. In a world where game show imperfections go unchecked, where judgment calls are questionable, and where clocks tick with unsynced inaccuracy, there is but one elite force to investigate it all. Armed with the latest in atomic electromagnetometer and gas chromatography mass spectrometry technology, Game Show Forensics is always on the case. Join Robert McKee and his elite squad of game show scientists as they dive headfirst into the most absurd depths possible at GameShowForensics.com. Adult discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury.